All right, so last time we started the parak that deals with learning Torah. Okay, we quickly kind of jumped back to the first gate, to the first section where he introduced the concept of Torah learning back there, right? And he basically told us that Torah is an intermediary that is able to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the highest level of Hashpah. Originates from the very kind of beginning of Hashem reaching out to the to the creation, right? The whole concept of creating somebody out, kind of other than himself, is what the Torah connects a person to, right? So it's a hashpah, and it's connected to the words of the Torah, the text of the written Torah, to the learning, to the internalizing, right? And he also told us that every part of Torah has its own hashpah, has its own connection, and every part is important, right? And and there's madregas. Every person different. The deeper you go into the seichel, the higher madrega you achieve, the higher level you achieve.
Right.
But every bit of Torah, even just plainly just reciting the text on some plain level, still connects you to this hashpah, right? It's an intermediary. It's a hook. It's a hook to this hashpah. That was the idea. That's what Torah is about. Torah is connecting to the very essence, to the very beginning of creation, right? Mm-hmm. To the very, I don't know how to say it, beginning, to that first step that makes the creation possible. Okay? So let's see, now we're up to page 258, is what I have. Page 258, Parak Dalet. I think we did Gimel already.
Okay, Dalet.
Right, basically that's what Gimel told us. Gimel said that every bit of Torah accomplishes something, and then there are different levels. The higher you get, the better. But there's none. Everybody accomplishes something. Now Dalet Amnam Zulas Zois HaHadroga. Now, in addition, besides this Hadroga, these different levels that we discussed till now, Hanimtzeis, that is found Ligmul as a reward, Hahistadlus Bnei Ha'adamba, for the effort of the people in it, right? Meaning, besides what I just told you, that every Torah is going to uplift a person because it's going to connect him to this highest hashpah, right? Besides that, Kishiyura Amiti, in proportion, which isn't true, which only Hashem knows the proper proportion of how much kind of connection that he's making. And he's going to explain that later. Oid nimtza bo hadroga, there's another kind of layering of levels, v'chiluk, and division, lefi mashet tzorich lesakin bo klal habriya, in what is necessary, what is needed to fix the entire creation. Okay? So meaning besides me being connected and me being uplifted to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm also uplifting the entire universe with me, right? And we saw this also back again when we originally read that paragraph in the first section, chapter 4:9. We noticed, right, that he has this 2 line or 3 lines here after he introduces us to the Torah. This is on page 70. After he introduces us to what the Torah is supposed to be, he tells us, "Ubechol ele ha'inyonim," in all of these things, lo yidaish mashekoyne hodam be'atzmai malo u'shleim. It's not enough that it's not only that a person acquires for himself a mila, right, an elevation, or shleimus, and perfection. Ela shemitzius abriya kula, rather the creation in its entirety, bechlalo beprata, in generality and in particular, mis'ale or mishtalim, is also elevated and is also perfected. Ubiprat al yidei Torah. So even though that elevation is really accomplished with all of our avodah, all of the service, but specifically vis-a-vis the Torah, it has that uplift, it has that elevation, right? So now that's what he's expanding on. He's expanding on this elevation of the universe vis-a-vis the Torah. So we said last time pshat maybe that Torah speaks of the ideal world, and the more you bring it down, the more you elevate it. But could be it's even more basic than that, since he told us that the Torah connects us to what? To the very hashpah that began the whole creation.
To the
right?
original light.
Right. So clearly that, right, the more we attach ourselves and the world to that very initial beginning of that creation, so clearly that's going to be an elevation to the world.
So that's the ultimate goal, attaching yourself to that very source in the beginning and elevating yourself and the rest of the
Correct.
world.
But over here specifically, it's not only about me over here. It's going to be, meaning there are certain things that it's about me and a byproduct the rest of the world. This over here, there's a much more of a direct link between uplifting the world through me. Not just happens to be just a byproduct, because I'm meaning that generally speaking, Hashem created the world only for me. So if I uplift myself, I uplift the world with me. That's the general. But over here, it's more than that. It's more direct. This thing is the DNA of the creation, so to speak. It's the first link, first start of the whole creative process. So over there, it's the perfection of creation, just in its initial, what's the word? In its initial form, right? So you connect the world to that initial form, to that whole concept of creation and God's perfect vision. So you're going to uplift the universe because that's the whole will of creation is encoded in this thing. Okay? So that's what he's saying. So oid nimtza bo hadraga v'chiluk. So therefore there is found in the Torah layering, right, and division, lefi ma shetzarich lesakin bo klal habriya, and what is necessary for it to fix the entire bria. At she'ein chelik mimeno, so there is no part of the Torah shelo yisukan on liodoi, which does not, as a result of its, is not fixed as a result of it, v'yushlam, and does not perfect chelik mechelke klal habriya, some part of parts of creation, right? So in other words, there's the Torah. Every single element in the Torah is connected by some string to some part of creation. Okay, v'nimtza, but that means something else. What he's saying now, an incredible chiddush. V'nimtza sheharoitza la'avoid lifnei boiroi avodah shlema, that if somebody who wants to serve before God, before his creator, a perfect avodah, a true service, tzorich sheyasek b'chol chalokeha kifi yicholtoi, he needs to involve himself in all parts of Torah in as much as possible for him. Because what's the purpose of avodah? Is basically what he's saying. What's the purpose of avodah? Avodah is not just for me. Is really I'm out there fixing the world. And now somebody just told me, listen, every single part of the Torah is connected to some part of the world. So I'm going to be learning Kedushin my whole life. I'm only fixing my backyard, so to speak.
Right.
What about the rest of the universe? So how am I really a true servant if I'm only learning some part of the Torah? My job, according to the Ramchal, is really to go out with b'chol yichol toy, with all of my ability, to learn every single aspect of Torah, to run through the Gemara and Medrash and written Torah, every single part of the Torah. There's not one part that's not connected to the universe. And if I am out there serving Hashem, and my whole job is to uplift the world, right, to bring light into this dark universe, so then my main emtsai, my main intermediary here is Torah learning, all aspect, every part of it.
To the best of my ability.
Right, obviously. As
right.
Pirkei Avos tells us, Lo elecha hamalocha ligmar. It's not for us to complete the task. We can only do as much as we can do. And he's going to say that. Okay, anyway, so let's just finish this paragraph. So, Kadesh Yagia, Kifi Yecholtoi, according to my ability, Kadesh Yagia Mimenu Hatikun El Chelke Abriya Kula, so that as a result I can bring rectification to all of parts of creation. Now, this is how he understands the following statement of Chazal, of the Gemara, that le'olam yishalish odom, that a person should always divide his time, his yom of his days, in three parts. he should divide his time in three sections. Shlish b'mikra, a third of his time in the written Torah. Shlish b'mishnah, a third of his time in Mishnah. Ushlish b'gemara, and a third of this time in Gemara.
Interesting.
Okay, and that's the Gemara in Kiddushin and Avodah Zarah over here. So meaning, I mean, you would have thought, okay, that's some kind of a division for better acquisition of Torah. But it's not. It's meaning he sees in this as a symbolic that there's the written Torah connects with one, so to speak, world, as we see Oilumais, right? So the written Torah connects with one world. The Mishnah is an oral Torah, but it's a certain level of the oral Torah that connects with another world. Gemara is oral Torah on a more seichel level, a person of like understanding that connects with another kind of world. And so it's important for a person to keep that progression in order to rectify each different layer of creation.
Right. So it's not just a logical progression; it's more like a recipe for
rectification. Right.
Okay. A raw cocktail for
right. Ubiklal zeh, of course, included in this is also called Chelkei Torah, is really to teach us, to tell us that it's really the same goes for all parts of Torah. Sheichalek b'hem zmana, that a person should divide his time in all parts of learning. Ad sheyoches bekulam, until he is able to grasp all of them. V'lo yaniach yodoi me'echad mehem, and he should not kind of relax his hand from any of them. Okay, this is a little bit kind of, in some sense, it's contrary to what modern yeshivas do. But again, it's kifi yechal toy. Obviously, clearly, our modern yeshivas believe that it's perhaps not within our ability to pursue all parts of Torah, because then we'll just have no knowledge of any part of Torah, because it's just too much for the 2020 brain. So 2020 brain is okay if we learn 7 blot of Gemara be'in with Rishonim and get some depth. That's already a good start for most people. Anyways, but he's of this philosophy that you really got to pursue everything. Achshir ha'esek, of course, the amount or the measurement of his involvement, sheyasik b'chol echad mehem, how much he should spend on each individual section, ra'ui sheyimoded lefi ma shehu ha'odam. It has to be, there has to be an individual learning plan. That's a very, in education, there's something, there's students that have an IEP, this individual, we usually say the specialized students, then you have their own path. But in reality, that's not the right outlook. It's really every person has to have an IEP. Every person has their own individual educational plan, right? So for every person, it's different. For some people, it's more written Torah, so to speak, and more philosophy, and less Gemara, more halacha. Every person has his own skladoma, his own way of thinking, and he should pursue whatever he is. Plus, there are people who are of higher intelligence or lower, lower intelligence, higher intelligence. So they have to set up their learning in a kufim mashahu odam, in as much as they are a person, to their level of their odamness, their seichelness. But this next phrase is very interesting. Ulefi kol hamikrim hakoyrim oisoy, and also in accordance in all of the happenings that happened to him. So he just used this as a word, and in translation, he just kind of uses one word. He says it should depend on his own particular nature and situation, right? His own nature and situation. But the text in Hebrew is a little more specific. It seems to be saying like that a person on the level, it's almost like, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it seems to me saying like, a learned person has to first understand, my place, so to speak, and my tafkid in the world, my potential in Torah learning. But then there is also, like again, lufi kol hamikrim, all of the happenings hakorim so that are happening to him. It sounds to me like since we just said that every part of Torah is connected to some part of creation, and every part of Torah is meant to elevate different parts of creation. So then you see, there's a pandemic happening. I have to now direct my learning to the parts of Torah that are pandemic related, so to speak, that are healing, because now that's going to be the way I'm going to rectify the world, because that's what the world needs right now. That's what these words sound to me like.
But he mentioned earlier that each one of us gets a personalized, not individual education plan, but individual endeavor plan, individual tafkid, an individual kind of a trip through life, right?
Right.
Individual set of circumstances, individual set of choices.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's necessarily contradictory.
No, right, exactly. I mean, all of us in the same locale are dealing with the same issues as a pandemic. But aside from that, it sounds like the constituents of the learning process almost need to be kind of tweaked and tailored as an individual educational plan towards the personal issues in life or the personal situations. I mean, there's got to be some sort of a correlation. If this is the recipe, Keneged Kulam, and this is a recipe to uplift the world, and we are able to, he gives a specific...
right, but I think to me, I'm not sure if I'm understanding you correctly, but to me what I'm understanding you is that is more related to each one of us, what we call, has a chelik in the Torah. It's more to the idea that that's what it sounds like to me, like meaning my experiences, my unique experiences, my unique nature, whether my inborn nature and my developed nature will allow me to appreciate the Torah in a different way, and so every person has his own chelik in Torah. Okay. Right? Over here, what to me it sounds like more along the lines of choice, meaning, of course I'm going to have my own different chelik in Torah, but right now the question is, should I be learning this or should I be learning this? So I have to be kind of attuned to my surroundings and to redirect myself to appropriate learning and appropriate time.
I think I'm headed in the same direction, right, based on your current situation and the choices that you're faced with.
I mean, that's what I think you're saying. Okay. So that what is interesting was we were just learning with Bode, right? Pirkei Avos, we're very apropos to this. We have a series of Mishnahs in the beginning of the third parak in Pirkei Avos that really very severe Mishnahs, almost like very hyperbolic sounding, like that have to do with Torah learning. So one Mishnah is that if a person is walking on the street, Derech is walking on his way, and then he's learning Torah and he gets sidetracked and he says, "Oh, how beautiful is that tree!" Right? And it says, "Kilu mischayev b'nafshe," as if he puts his life in danger. And the next Mishnah says, if a person forgets one word of Torah, is also Kilu mischayev b'nafshe, also puts his life in danger. So it's like very severe, like too much. Sounds like too much. But could be now. So first of all, we were saying that the two Mishnahs, are like two sides of the same coin. Meaning there's the Ram and the Ram, right? Meaning there's one is I'm immersed right now in Torah learning, and my Torah demands immersion. There's really no way to really get to the bottom to know something truly unless you really immerse yourself. And so any interruption becomes, completely ruins the immersion process, right? It's not 2020 is, again, mind is against this concept of immersion. We think of, multitasking and always kind of, that's our mode of thinking, which is completely antithetical to what Torah learning demands. Torah learning demands full, turn off. Tadema, so to speak, as we saw by prophecy, you have to knock yourself out, right? And if you interrupt yourself, then you lost it. And that's on a short, that's your short-term memory, right? That's your active memory. And then there is the long-term memory. I learned already something, I know it, and I didn't review it. And now it slipped my mind. And then when they asked me a shayla, I was like, oh yeah, sure, kind of, yeah, whatever, yeah, it's good, it's mutter. And then you realize that it's usher, and it's, so the mayor says, okay, that's also kilu mischayv b'nafsho. You take responsibility, right? So that's it. So again, for because if we understand, right, just like we understand if somebody is a brain surgeon, right, and he has a surgery on this particular, I don't know, whatever it is, some hypothalamus, I don't know, some brain, right? That particular day he spaced out in class, and as a result he made some rookie mistake and caused permanent brain damage to his patient.
Right.
He's not gonna say, "Oops, I was, I didn't pay attention that day," right? It's like you're not gonna, if you understand how serious and severe what you're learning is, how many repercussions, you're gonna make sure to take it seriously. And if you don't take it seriously, who's responsible? You're responsible, right? So similarly, if we understand now how the full impact of Torah learning and its ability to rectify the world, right? And if a person does not take it seriously, right, either because he gets distracted, or because he doesn't put his whole mind into it, or because he doesn't review it, or because he doesn't really allow himself to fully grasp it, so who's responsible? So he's responsible, and it's quite severe, because the Torah has. I mean, it's a scary thought. That's the thing. It's a scary thought that we don't fully appreciate. Right, we don't fully appreciate how much power, and how much healing power, so to speak, we possess, and then just completely throw out the window because we don't. Okay, all right. Let's continue. So this next piece is also very interesting. Let's say, so now paragraph Hey, Ach hatanoim hatzrichim. Now, there are conditions that are necessary, lihislavos, to accompany the Talmud, to the learning. Hinehem, there are two, he says, only two conditions. Okay, you would have thought there'd be more. I mean, Pirkei Avos, the last Mishnah says there are 48, perhaps, right? He says there are two. What are the two? Hayira b'Talmud atzmai, fear as it relates to learning itself. Okay, v'tikun hamaisa b'chol eis, and continuous self-improvement. Okay, that's it. Two conditions. That's it. If you want to achieve this kind of rectification of the universe, two conditions are necessary. Hayira b'Talmud doesn't say fear of God, so to speak, even though it's really essentially the same thing, but the angle is still different, as we'll see in a second. Against Hayira b'Talmud atzmo, v'tikun ha'maisa b'chol eis, and continuous self-perfection. Meaning, I'm assuming it means, if you learn, A is mutter, B is osir, and you don't put it to action, so then your learning is disconnected from what you're doing. So then it's not learning. Then it's whatever it is, but it's not Torah learning. Okay, so let's see. He's going to expand on it now. V'zeh, and this is Kihine kol koicha shel haTorah einoi ela b'mashe koshar. Because the entire power, the entire force of Torah is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu koshar, he attached to it, and he connected to it with Tola, and made it dependent on it, is Baruch as hashpa osoi hayikarabo. This great and precious influence, this hashpa that Hashem connected to it. That as a result of speaking in it, and enlightenment of he is able to bring down this incredible, great hashpa'ah, this great influence, this great flow of perfection. Right? However, without this, meaning without what? Without having this, this connection there, right? Without the fact that me speaking is accomplishing something. Why is it accomplishing something? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says your words are going to be connected to this hashpah, right? But there has to be something that makes the link, right?
Yeah.
Right? But without that link, that'd be no different. There's no, my speech in Torah is no different than my speech in, whatever, when I'm at work, right? Okay, I have to think at work. I have to think when I'm learning. I have to think when I'm talking to my kids, I have to think when again, right? So it's the same.
Otherwise
It's the same speech. It's not a different. I'm speaking to it like Rabbi Shimon says. It would be good for us to have two different mouths, one for holy things and one for unholy things. But it's not. We have one mouth, and it's the same speech, and it's the same thought process. And so, what's the difference? Okay. So there would be no difference if not for that link that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, or any other science that we could pursue, b'chol shar maskolos, and all other pursuit of intelligence, hametzius hativi leminehem, in the natural creation according to their types, right? So whatever branch of science I want to pursue, it's the same thing. This is Torah science, there's natural science, there's biology, there's right. So what's the difference? Because just like in those branches of science, I acquire some knowledge. In this branch of science, I also acquire some knowledge. There is no as resulting elevation umayla klal b'nefesh hakoyreh that is accomplished in the nefesh of the reader. Right? In the other branches of science, he's saying over here that there is no. One second, I'm going to read this one carefully. Hold on. Ve'ein magia mimenu hisatzmos yikar, u'mayla klal b'nefesh hakoyreh. There's no precious uplifting at all. Hamedaber v'hamaskil, whether in a speaker or in a thinker. V'loi tikun l'klal habriya, and certainly there's no rectification for the entirety of creation. Okay, this is why I'm slow down, because I had a passage in Mesilas Yesharim that I understood that there is some elevation, even in other branches of science, according to the Ramchal. So this particular line seems to contradict that. Okay, it seems to be, so there's, because the word klal really throws me off. Umayla klal, there's no elevation whatsoever. I would have said not that way. I would have said that any kind of intellectual pursuit is still on some level
is an
elevation, because I'm still pursuing an abstract concept, right? Not physical things. Okay, but that's not okay. He's at least over here. He's making it not that way. Okay, right? But the point that he's trying to make is that without that link, there is nothing about the substance of learning that is different from any kind of other learning or any kind of mundane activity, right? Okay.
And that link was specifically provided by the Creator.
Right. So let's keep going. Yeah. Let's see. Right. However, this hashpo, this flow, this influence, hine inyono eloki, its innate in essence is godly. It's divine. Right. Meaning it's religious. Again, I'm just going to kind of put a twist to it, meaning it's not mundane, it's religious. There's religious activity that's happening. What transforms my Torah learning, according to the Ramchal, from just learning into a religious activity is some religiosity, right?
In approach.
Right. V'lo oid, and not only that, elo shehu hayoser elyon, but not only is this hashpo godly, right? Not only is it godly, it's also hayoser elyon. It's is the highest possible, v'nizgav, and most uplifted shebinyonim hanimshachim of all possible things that can be possibly brought down from above to below. That could possibly can reach from Hashem to His creations. And since this is a religious activity, a divine activity that connects between the highest level and, so to speak, the lowest levels, right? Vadai, certainly, sheyesh lo le'odam, that it's appropriate for a person, leroy, to fear, v'leroyd, and to have trepidation, be'oskei be'inyan kazeh, to be involved in such a matter. right? So it's a catch-22 in a certain sense. Meaning, I don't mean catch-22, but it's these things where, that on one hand, it's an activity that seems mundane on its face value. On the other hand, Hashem said, I'm going to link this to the highest thing possible, right? To the highest source possible. But where does this link appear? It appears when I approach it with that trepidation that I'm about to connect to the highest source possible. But it's the thing that unlocks it, so to speak. I don't know how to say it. Why am I approaching it with trepidation? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu I have the ability to connect to the highest source possible. But my ability to connect to the highest source possible is initiated by that trepidation that I have, because now I understand that I'm conducting this divine religious activity. So the connection is unlocked by the trepidation, even though the trepidation comes as a result of this connection.
Okay.
Right?
That makes sense. Otherwise, it would be just me reading a book.
Right. Because it appears, comes out, what a person is learning Torah, he's actually approaching right before God. And he's involved, he's involved in bringing down the great light from Hashem to himself. Okay? V'hinei tzorich, and so as a result, tzorich sheyevoish mishiflusa ha'anoishi. And therefore he needs to be kind of bashful from his state of loneliness of flesh and bloodliness. Yeah? Meaning, since he's approaching kind of the highest level of divine, he has to be acutely aware of how
undivine he is.
Right. V'yirash mirayim Musa, and he should kind of shake from Hashem's loftiness, his baruch. V'hinei, but on the other hand, v'hinei yogel me'oid mechelkoi hatov. He has to have real jubilation from his fortune that that he merits to achieve this connection. But at the same time, so it's jubilation through and trepidation. Of course, included in this, that he cannot be sitting in a light-hearted, just like joking mood. And certainly he cannot act in any way of bizoyon, of what's bizoyon? What's the English word for bizoyon? He says disrespect. Whatever. We understand what it means. Bizayon, right? Lo bidvareha, not in the way he speaks, but lo bidvareha, and not in books, meaning he has to treat Sforim with respect also. V'yeda lifnei mi oimed umisasek. He has to be aware before whom he is standing and he is learning. So if achieves this level of what did he call this before? He called this hayira b'talmud atzma. If achieves this level of fear, and when it comes to learning, yeah. I'm sorry. If he achieves this, then his learning will actually be what it's supposed to be. Meaning this right. He'll be able to bring down this influence that we have mentioned, and there will be strengthened in him this preciousness, divine preciousness. And as a result, the rectification and enlightenment will be brought down to the entire creation. But if he is missing this tanai, this condition, if he's missing this condition, there will be no light brought down as a result. and his words will be simply like other mundane human speech. Hegyoinoi, his talking, kikoirei geris, will be just reading a letter. Umachshavoisav, in his contemplations, kechoishev b'divrei oilam, will be no different than somebody who contemplates the world. Ve'adrabba, and the opposite. What's the opposite? Le'ashma techoshev loy. It will be considered a sin, a guilt for him. Meaning, if he is learning Torah and does not approach it with the proper kind of religious perspective, so and as a result loses out on the opportunity of connection and rectification, so then that's going to be considered as he's going to be charged for this, right? He's going to right? Shekorav el HaKodesh, because he approached the holy, b'li moira, without fear. Umekel roishu lifnei boira, and he kind of lightened his head. He was lighthearted before his Creator. Oida medaber lefonav, right as he's speaking, right before him. Umesaseh b'ktushoso yisbarach, as he's involved in his holy things. Ve'ulam, however, kefi madregas hamoira, in accordance, in proportion to the level of fear, v'shir hakovod v'azihirus boy, and the measure of kovod, of honor, and watchfulness and carefulness in learning Torah, ken yashiru yokar alimud, so too will be the level of his learning, umadregosa hashponim shachas al yodoi, and the level of the flow that he is able to bring down as a result. Right? So this is incredible. This is powerful stuff, right? Powerful stuff. So in a certain sense, again, I'm just thinking now about this. I didn't think about this before, so I'm thinking out loud. I'm not sure if this is right, but if you remember when we were learning Nefesh HaChaim, right? Nefesh HaChaim also addressed this idea of Torah Lishma, which is what I think he's addressing, Torah Lishma, and Nefesh HaChaim's Torah Lishma was, in a certain sense, meaning there was a question. Torah Lishma means for the sake of God, or for the sake of learning Torah. And the Nefesh HaChaim says, no, Lishma means just for the sake of knowing the Torah. That's Lishma, for the sake of knowing the Torah. And the Ramchal, in a certain sense, I think, unites the two perspectives. In Ramchal's world, for the sake of God is for the sake of learning Torah. And for the sake of learning Torah is for the sake of God. Because the way what is Torah? According to Ramchal, it's not the knowledge. According to Ramchal, the knowledge itself is empty. And I don't think Nefesh HaChaim would agree with the Ramchal's kind of formulation. Maybe he would agree on like an ideal state. Ramchal, you're right, but we have a concept of mitech shelo lishma bo lishma, right? But in an ideal state, Ramchal, you're right. Torah is only achievable to these highest levels are only achievable according to the proportion of moira, of trepidation, of fear and responsibility. We get that, but to say that there is nothing achieved and it's a guilt that if you don't approach it with that level, that the Nefesh HaChaim might say, okay, Ramchal, I hear you, but leave some room for the simple people, right? But Ramchal is saying, but in certain sense, there's a beauty in Ramchal also. Ramchal is saying, you're right. There is a difference between a regular mitzvah that we do l'shem Hashem, right, l'shmoi, versus the Torah which we learn l'shma, right, where the Torah l'shma, which means l'shmoi, l'shem Hashem, but by doing it l'shmoi, we unlock the l'shma, so to speak, because we cannot unlock the Torah learning without that understanding, that fear that comes with approaching the divine. That itself unlocks because otherwise it's just empty words, right? It's just words. It's just logic.
So that's
it's just
prerequisite. That's what makes it actually.
Right. That's what makes it. More than the prerequisite. That's what makes it,
right.
Exactly. So in the Ramchal, he kind of answers the Nefesh HaChaim's question. Why does the Gemara calls it l'shma for the sake of Torah and not l'shmoi for the sake of Hashem? So Ramchal says because it's l'shmoi for the sake of Hashem makes the Torah into the Torah. Without it, it's nothing. Right? While the Ramchal says no. The Gemara is telling you Lishma means for the sake of Torah. Forget Hashem.
You won't get there.
Right. Forget it. Right? So I think maybe there's very different perspectives on this concept, but that's what the Ramchal is saying. Okay, but in any ways, it's very powerful stuff. Very powerful stuff, because now we understand, we kind of get a little flavor of what Ramchal's view on Torah learning was.
I think Rav Dessler also speaks about the learning, when the person does it improperly, that it creates the counter effect, that it's a bezobrazia.
Right, but I'm not sure. I don't remember offhand what he's referring to. I mean, we have in the Gemara of Lekanter where you're doing it for the wrong reasons or for the covet. I mean, over here he's not even saying that. Right, he seems to be saying, meaning we usually think if you did it for ulterior motives, or you did it in the wrong way.
Right, that's understood.
That's okay.
Right, I think I'm not quoting.
That's how you internalize it. Okay.
It was a very similar approach. If you do it carelessly, then you thought you learned, and in reality you did completely the opposite. Right. You shouldn't have learned to begin with, because you did more damage than you did good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is courtesy of Rav Bach. I'll have to revisit.
Okay, let's should we go a little bit more? Okay, we'll just start. Hatanai Hasheni. So that's the first. This is considered the first requirement, right? Hatanai Hasheni, and the second condition, hu tikkun hamas, is rectification of his action. Ki hine mishi yirtze lehamshich hashpa. Because somebody who is intent on bringing down this influence, ra'ui, it is appropriate, hu hogun umuchan lamshicha. He has to be, so to speak, a proper vessel. He has to be worthy of being able to bring it down. So it's not like what I said. Meaning it's not like what I said originally, what I thought it meant. Meaning that the reason why you need to constantly correct yourself is because otherwise you're disconnecting what you're learning to what you're doing. He's saying it's deeper than that. It's more than that. That you have, again, it's more like a religious thing, meaning you are connecting yourself to such a high level of purity, of divinity, and if you're not going to constantly self-perfect, then how dare you approach the divine?
Right, if it's right, okay.
Right, so again, very, so to say, very elitist kind of, you know what I mean?
We can assume that the actual process of learning is this, perfects you in certain ways.
Right. But you would have said, go learn, right? If the Yetzer Hara grabs you, what do you do? Go around to shul and start learning. I'm not worthy to approach the divine. Okay, don't worry.
On myself today
right, don't worry, go for it, right? That's so. But that's not what he's saying. He says, somebody who wants to bring down this hashpah, it's appropriate, he has to be worthy and ready, prepared to bring it down. So if he goes ahead and he defiles himself in guilts and sins, right? And he distances himself from his creator, and he steers away from him, and he runs after forces of tuma and evil. Vadai, certainly, that we will say regarding this person, and Hashem says to the wicked one, why are you speaking in my commandments? Right, so that's a pasuk in Tehillim that seems to imply this idea that there is an element, of like we say, this guy is a murderer, and he comes to shul and he starts learning Torah. It's like, what are you doing here?
It's a debatable point,
right. So there's a Hasidic part of us that says, every Jew, right. But there's another part of it that says like, you know, whatever.
Right.
Right?
I hear his point.
But that's what he's saying. To a wicked man, God says, "Why are you speaking in my commandments?" And so too, our sages of blessed memory said, "Kol hamelamed letalmid she'enoi hogun." Anybody who teaches to a student who is not worthy, ki'ilu zoyrek evan lemarkelis. It's as if he's throwing a rock to a markelis. Right? What's markelis? Markelis is a certain type of avodah zarah, and the way you serve this avodah zarah was you threw rocks at it. So basically, this is Evan Lamarkelis. There's a question. I offhand remember why specifically this avodah zarah was chosen. Second, there's a good word about this. Why this avodah zarah? Why Evan? Okay, v'hine ish kazeh. So such, but anyways, but you see from here that teaching a Talmud that is not Hogan, that is not worthy, is a sin. Is a sin, like avodah zarah. What is avodah zarah? Avodah zarah is going toward the tzadatuma, so to speak. So it sounds from the Ramchal is that a person who's not worthy, what he's doing is taking this divine influence and is channeling it into the wrong channels. V'hine ish kazeh, and such a man, vaday sheteirosoy loy tamshich min hashpos zacharna. So it doesn't say like I just said, even though it sounded like before. He says a person like this certainly he will not be able to pull down this hashpah, this influence, zacharna shum madrega klal, in any shape or form, in any way. Oh, this is where. Okay, one second. This is where Ramchal puts it back into perspective. V'afal pikein, right? So this was the highest level. Now Ramchal brings it down back home a little bit. V'afal pikein, and even still, Roz Godol Gilu Lonu Chachmeinu Zichron Levracha. A great secret was revealed to us by our sages, blessed memory. She'ilu lohoyu harashoyim oizvim es Talmud HaTorah. That as long as the wicked would not leave the learning of Torah, soif shehoyu choyzrim lemutav, in the end they would return to good. Ki afal pi, that even though she'ein bekoichem lehamshich shum hemshich milefonav yisborach, even though they have no power, no ability to bring down any of this divine influence, right? The connection is not there. Kamosh zacharnu, as we mentioned. Kvar divrei haTorah be'atzmam, still and all the words of Torah themselves, mikudoshim v'oimdim, they are prapitane, they are soaked in kedusha. The words of Torah themselves, even though he just finished telling us, the words of Torah themselves are no different than any other science.
What happened to the
right? He's saying no. He's saying still and all the words of Torah, because of that connection was made. Now there is some remnant of kedusha that has already became part and parcel of the words of the Torah. Mitzad atzmam, by their very nature. Hasmid ha'esek bahem, that if a person has a hasmoda, has a constant connection to them, constant involvement in them, yagia mehem pam achar pam ktsasi soiris, little by little, okay, there will be ktsasi soiris, there will be a little spark, a little awakening, okay. So I say, well, let's. So he's saying, first of all, a very interesting idea. He's saying, it's not that, okay, that once in a blue moon I open the Torah. I'm a wicked person. Once in a blue moon I open the Torah, is going to return me back to life. No, but if I do have a constant connection, there is a little drip that occurs, a little drip, a little drip, a little drip, a little drip. Eventually, will turn me around. That's right. It's pamach or pam. It's behasmid ha'esik. If I continue in an asik, an involvement in these words. Little by little, there's going to be a little hisoyrus, k'moidmus ha'ora, like an image of enlightenment. It's not real enlightenment, but it's a remnant of enlightenment. Katanas shebekatanas. It's as little as minute as possible. El ha'oisik b'hem, that it's achieved to the person who is involved in words of Torah. Shesoif, that in the end, little by little, tigbar olav, it will accumulate upon him, v'tachzirehu lemutav, and will return him back towards good. V'hu masha amru chachmeinu zechronim levracha, and this is what our sages of blessed memory said. Halavai oisi ozvu. Hashem is saying, it's okay if they would leave me behind, v'teirosi shomaru, and they would keep my Torah. Shehamaor shebo machzirin lemutav, because the light that's in it is going to return them towards good. Va'amnam poshuthu, however, of course, it's poshut, she'ena dvorim amudim, that this is not to be said over b'mishi sasik bo derech schoik v'hitu. And we're not talking about that somebody is learning it as a joke, and right, as just some kind of perversion and laughing stock, right? Or legalos b'om ponim shlo ke'alocha, or he's trying to find ponim, some kind of ways that are not in accordance with halacha. He has to learn it to at least on the level of somebody who's learning any other branch of science, with an intellectual integrity that is worthy of just any kind of learning, right? So if a person is open to it, even though he doesn't have his level, so he could be a Rasha, number one. Let's say he is a Rasha. So he's talking about the second part. He is a Rasha, which obviously also means he doesn't have any trepidation when he's approaching God. Still, he's saying that there is some kind of a small light that remains. That light is going to slowly accumulate. Okay, right, that's it. Do we understand really? Do I understand? Where is this light coming from? Right? He says, I'll just read the words carefully. He says, Roz Godol Gilulonu Chachamenu Zechrono. There's a great secret. Right? Again, he doesn't use words lightly. Right? There's a great secret that our sages reveal to us. What's the great secret? Okay, we're going to get it. Okay, you could learn. It's fine. You could learn. What's the great secret? What's the great secret? Why is this a great secret? Why is this a great secret? I'm not sure. But there's something here, right? There's something here that he's saying that even though what I just described to you, the connection to the highest level of Torah learning cannot connect without these conditions, without these prerequisites, without these switches, somehow there's something there. But wait, I don't understand. How is there something there? And then why is that a secret? Why is it such a secret that there is something there? No, I'm not sure. That wouldn't be a secret. It would be okay. Chidush Godel. Call it whatever you want. A Chesed Godel, right? And call it whatever you want. Roz Godel, a great secret. There's something more going on here that means the eye. Roz Godel. Okay, I guess we'll stop here. We have just one, or should we just finish this paragraph?
Okay.
Yeah? V'ulam, however, somebody who purifies and sanctifies himself with his deeds, with his actions, he is able to bring down through his learning this hashpah, this influence, in proportion to the preparation that he prepared himself. Right? So what he's saying is, both times, he said this in regarding, so there are two tanais. He says there are two conditions. Right? There are two conditions. One condition is, let's call it yira, and the other condition is tikkun ha'maaseh. Right? One is fear, and the other one is self-improvement. Okay? Fear and self-improvement. Those are the two conditions. Now, you could have said they're prerequisites. Prerequisite means if you have them, you open the door and you're in the door, and then the rest is how far are you going to get once you're through the door? Okay, that depends on other factors, right? In both, he made it a point that no, it's not true. Besides opening the door, right, it's how far you're going to get through the door also is proportional to the fear and the trepidation and proportional to the preparation that a person achieved.
So these are tools.
Right. These are not only prerequisites, they're also kind of connectors. They're also intermediaries to get there. Right? Good. V'kashir sheyarbe b'hachana, and in proportion to the measure that he increases in hachana, in his preparation, ken yirbe yakar hatalmud v'koiches. So too he will increase the preciousness of his learning and its impact. And this is what we find in our sages of earlier generations, that we find that they were crowned by Torah to such a great degree. And it was giving them, uplifted them to such much higher levels that what is not found in these later generations, right? So he's bemoaning the fact that we're nowhere. Again, this is Ramchal saying, forget about us, right? So Ramchal is saying that the early sages, they had this connection. They were able to open these light switches. We have no shaykhs to this. Why were they open? Because because of their extra levels of their preparedness, as opposed to the later sages. Right, and they say regarding Yonasan ben Uzziel, that at the moment that he was learning Torah, kol oif shehoya perech olav hoya nisraf, that any bird that flew overhead would get burnt up. Mipnei oitzam hashras hashchina, because of the intensity of the resting of the Shechina that would rest upon him as a result of his learning. Right? So the intensity was so palpable that that it had physical ramifications, there were physical implications of his learning. Right? So that's what he's saying. That's all about Hachana. Okay. Anyways, very powerful stuff. Okay. Shkoyach.